And welcome to another edition of the Morning Briefing. I'm Jeff DeForest. My good friend now from California, Henry Markin, sitting in for Mike Lubitz, who still is in Morocco. And the word is the man's okay. Last time we saw him, he was in a race on camels, believe it or not. He looked like Jerry Bailey out there, whipping and driving and trying to make it to the wire. But then he realized the desert is endless, right? Hey, where's the finish line? I have no idea. It was, I don't know. And speaking of Morocco, I mean, this strikes us here in Florida, especially so. And you sometimes see these shots when there's been some kind of catastrophic event, like an earthquake, I guess, in another country. Hopefully, not in California anytime soon. I know the Northridge one was the last time it happened, and then you're okay, whatever it is, the area that you were in. In this case, I'm going back to 1992 here in South Florida, and I had moved to Florida in 1981 after living in LA for several years, Henry. And I come here. I didn't know anything about hurricanes, but it was kind of like the boy who cried wolf. The news people, they weren't as extreme as they are now when it comes to any kind of an event that happens. But back then, used to always break out old footage of a hurricane that hit Florida, say in like the 60s, Hurricane Camille. And you would see the shot of that one stop sign blowing in the wind, and you're thinking, no big deal, right? So all of the warnings were coming about Hurricane Andrew. This was going to be a monster. It was going to hit right where I was living. The cone of death, as they call it, had a bullseye. My house was right there in the center of the cone. And you're wondering what to do. And, well, we had never taken these warnings very seriously before. In fact, I remember being on a pregame show for a ball game, a Dolphin game, and we were talking about it and saying, hey, no big deal, right? We've seen these shots a million times. And then, the hurricane hit, and it hit far south of where I was located, about 60 miles south in a city here in Florida called Homestead. And, you're peeling yourself off the mat the next morning. The hurricane's over, winds have died down. It's kind of pleasant out after that, the calm after the storm. And we didn't know what happened, right? We're looking, a few trees are down, a couple of things happened, some broken glass here and there. And then all of a sudden on TV comes the pullback shot of where the hurricane actually did its damage in Homestead, and an entire city is flattened. And you're looking and you're going, holy shit, I can't believe that. The aftermath sometimes and the reality of the damage that was done is devastating. And I think, the Jet fans are trying to shrug this off, and analysts are trying to shrug this off, this Aaron Rodgers injury. It was a painful reminder to a lot of people, and we touched on some of these things yesterday, Henry, about the failings of the Jets in the past. And we were kind of going into the anatomy of a curse and how it
Mhm,
comes about with the team. And
mhm.
you could pinpoint a few things. Actually, there's a startling parallel. In 1999, the Jets, under the auspices and coaching of the great tuna himself, Bill Parcells, had just gone the prior year to the AFC Championship game in 1998. They were very optimistic about what their chances were going to be. And in the very first game coming out of the chute in 1999, as they're trying to defend their playoff status of the previous year and maybe even be considered as a Super Bowl contender, they lose Vinny Testaverde on one of the very early plays in the game. Achilles injury, out for the season, and the rest is history. They're still looking for that championship. It's way off in the distant future, I think. 2000, right? Bill Belichick is briefly the coach of the team. Now, we don't know what would have happened. There's a lot of argument now about whether Bill Belichick is the greatest of all time. I don't know where you weigh in on that. Bill Belichick, does he get a pass? I mean, can he help it that he actually brought Tom Brady to the surface? There's a chance Brady would have never gotten a shot to do the things that he accomplished. Could coaching, bad coaching, have held him back? Dean Smith held the great Michael Jordan under 20 points a game with that ridiculous offense of his, the four corners, where you're a lousy coach and that your strategies are completely flawed when they have to institute a rule to combat the fact that you're being a dickhead. And with all the McDonald's All Americans that you could possibly accumulate,
Right,
you're going to
right.
go into a stall like you were in the driveway with your little sister and one of your buddies trying to play a little salugi, as we used to call it, where you keep the ball away from the little kid and keep him at bay. Such ugliness. But with Belichick, he was the coach of the Jets for like a half an hour. Remember that? He briefly, signed to become the head coach of the New York Jets. He had the tenure in Cleveland, and oh no, he ended up going to Cleveland after that, I believe. But he left the job before he even set foot into the office, and that might have changed their fortunes. Although he is 79 and 88 without Tom Brady. For those detractors of Bill Belichick that say, yeah, well, how good would he be without Brady? How good would any of these coaches be without their star quarterbacks that they had? Can you imagine? I mean, who's really done, a great job of persisting at a high level, Henry, without having a great quarterback on their team? What coach?
Kyle
None.
Shanahan.
Shanahan?
Uh,
Yeah. I mean, some guys are able to work quarterbacks in. Shanahan is pretty remarkable at that, but I can't ever forget. And I don't know, you 49er fans, how can you ever forget that second half of the Super Bowl against the Patriots?
no, I know, and he has so many flaws, time management, play calling down the stretch. I get that, but as far as the original question goes, how many other coaches do well, regardless of who their starter is? Kyle Shanahan is the first and only guy that comes to mind. I mean, he put together an incredible run with Jimmy fucking Garoppolo,
Well, and Brock Purdy, I mean, came out
and
of
now
nowhere
Brock
also,
Purdy, yeah, who may be the
and he
truth,
looks
by the
pretty
way.
good. What's that?
Purdy may be the truth. He may be the guy.
Could be. Isn't that amazing? All of the scouting, all the sophisticated methods they have now of
Yeah,
analytics and sabermetrics, and
right,
let's face it, you can just go to a game and watch a guy play. You would think that would work.
right.
And every team decides that this guy isn't worth a shot. And I know some teams that when they get to the seventh round, they're thinking, they're better off grabbing these guys as undrafted free agents. And
Yeah,
a lot of players would prefer to be undrafted free agents than be Mr. Irrelevant like Purdy was. But, the things shook out, and we'll see. Maybe that'll happen for Zach Wilson. But the Belichick thing, just part of the disastrous buildup to what happened with Aaron Rodgers and the Jets the other night. And then, I'll never forget, and we mentioned this. I was actually at this game, the Mud Bowl game, where the speculation was that Don Shula ordered somebody to come and water down the field before Richard Todd and the 1982 New York Jets took the field that day at the Orange Bowl. And Todd ended up throwing like 11 picks to A.J. Dewey, the linebacker for the Dolphins, and they won the game and ended up going to the Super Bowl that year. So that was another Jet disaster. Never did get to the bottom of it. Shula kept that a secret to his grave. As he was being rolled out on his deathbed, people were saying, "Hey, Dad, did you do it? Did you do it?" And never admitted it. Never, just a wry smile on his face, knowing that he had fucked over the Jets one more time. And then, of course, passing on Marino and taking Ken O'Brien, that in and of itself spells disaster. So a lot of that stuff came to light with the New York Jets in the aftermath of the Rodgers injury. And then, I mean, and this is troubling. The artificial turf issue in the National Football League. And, I mean, they did play the frozen tundra game. That was, 1967. You can still see Jerry Kramer sending Jethro Pugh into the first row of the stands there, and Bart Starr going over the right side, just off the center position, and scoring the touchdown to win the ice ball game and ice the Dallas Cowboys in the process, which I think is always a pleasant byproduct, at least for me, of any result, even if I could care less about that edition of the Packers. They were a dynastic team then. Oddly, in that game, there was a guy, and they always refer to him. And is this sort of an unflattering distinction for your career, Henry, when they refer to you not as the guy that really triggered that big comeback by the Green Bay Packers in one of the most historic championship games of all time, but always as the giant castoff, as in the Giants, New York Giants got rid of this guy. His name was Chuck Mersine. And I think on his epitaph, even on his gravestone, it says the giant castoff.
God, yeah.
And I mean, could your career be characterized as being more of a bag lady type schlepper than to have that be the case? But he was the one guy, I think he was on skates that day. He was the one guy that was able to navigate his way around the field there, and he made a lot of key plays in that particular ball game. But that being said, I mean, should this game be played on concrete? There's a lot of speculation that the turf at MetLife Stadium, and holy George Toma, where is this guy when you need him? They can't grow grass in New Jersey. Have you ever had New Jersey tomatoes? Excellent. I mean, farming is part. I guess this is more southern New Jersey, but well, what would be the premise? Is it just to save money that MetLife Stadium is situated with artificial turf that was always condemned as being hazardous in the past? And oddly, I think it was this year that they replaced it with some new synthetic surface that and they're having this problem in horse racing where they can't decide: is it the track, is it the drugs, what is it? I would probably opt for the
Right,
drugs if I was
right,
going to begin my
sure.
investigation.
Yeah,
But
I think that variable has been isolated. Definitely.
you would think, yeah. I mean, they do all of these studies. They did it at Santa Anita. They did it now recently at Churchill Downs, and the ultimate conclusion is, it ain't the track. So could be that box full of syringes that fell out of like Bob Baffert's wife's purse when I saw them one day at a restaurant in San Diego at the Del Mar meet that I was attending at the time. But that being said, I mean, where's the players' union on this? I didn't even realize this. You're familiar with DeMaurice Smith? He was the head of the NFLPA, the players' reps for years since like 2008 when Gene Upshaw checked out. And DeMaurice Smith, I don't know if you remember when he came on the scene in 2008. I mean, this guy was a radical. You would have thought, wow, the players behind this man, it was like having Louis Farrakhan or Malcolm X going ahead and professing your case and all of the injustices and inequities that were taking place in the NFL. And, the NFL wasn't exactly, the poster child for racial equality, in spite of the fact that the majority of their players were black and African American. It didn't matter. They had guys like Bud Adams out there. Now, hardly the kind of guy that you would see saying, "Hey, you know what? Abe was right." Not necessarily the philosophy of the league. So this guy really clashed. I mean, with everything that was going on in the National Football League. But over time, I mean, is this like selling out to the Saudis? I mean, is this a Phil Mickelson type of move, Henry? Where over time, DeMaurice Smith went from this, very, very boisterous, radical voice, extolling the ways that the players were getting screwed, and all of the unfairness and the things that were going on in the NFL that were so badly and heavily in favor of the owners. And he literally morphed into Gene Upshaw himself, who was the head of the players union when it was at its absolute weakest. And I don't know, if you remember, anytime somebody was trying to be in compliance with the Rooney Rule, they had to interview like a couple of potential black head coaches, and then they would interview the two guys. Eric Bieniemy went through this like what 100 times. How bad can you be in an interview? You've probably left a couple of job interviews in your lifetime here. I don't know. Maybe it even didn't go so well with Joe Manuel and No Filter when you were first signing on, and said, "Man, I really blew that interview." And you realize it was your fault. But how many interviews could this Eric Bieniemy have blown before you start to think maybe it is a racist league? Is it possible? I mean, that they were just denying this, or is he really that bad at doing an interview? Anyway, I mean, to comply with the Rooney Rule, where teams had to, even though they had already selected some old salty white guy that had been, a failure in the league for the past 35 years, and was now toiling around as a quarterbacks coach with some low-level team. And they anoint him to be the most promising head coaching candidate ahead of any number of qualified African American candidates that were coming out of other assistant coaching positions, maybe even on the college level, and they would just go visit the grave of Gene Upshaw, and that would put them in compliance. There you go. There was one black candidate, and DeMaurice Smith was kind of in line with this. But he has since left the job. It's troubling to think that you can have an issue like this where it's known that a certain field surface has an inordinate amount of injuries, and the NFL Players Association, when everybody's screaming, "We want grass, not just to smoke, but to play on," and nothing gets done about it. It's insane. So that's another thing that comes to light in the aftermath of the Rodgers injury, because there are people making the assertion that it was because of the surface of the field. I don't know that I totally buy that, but I'm thinking the chances are enhanced greatly that you're going to have that type of injury if you're playing on a surface that isn't conducive to getting knocked on your ass on. And maybe that was somewhat in play there. And now the other part of this whole equation that's kind of interesting is this anointment of Zach Wilson as if he was great all along. It's
Well,
baffling.
what I see actually is a perfect in movie terms we call this redemption arcs, right? This is the absolute opportunity to come in and redeem yourself, like where the character who's just driven by ego and crazy ambition and honestly just fell stubbed his own toe comes back, new character development, nicer, kinder, different perspective on life. I said this yesterday on my show, Dr. PPR. I think we're looking at a renaissance of Zach Wilson, a
Wow.
very
I'm going to
different
hold you
Zach
to that
Wilson.
prediction, Henry. We're
Yeah,
going to come back to this in about
absolutely.
6 weeks, and we'll play this tape. It'll be like that Trump interview we had with that guy from
Oh,
Fox, where he said, "Hey, Donnie, I mean, I'm not buying this shit," and he had no response whatsoever. Uh, Look, I don't root against the guy. The guy was the number 2 overall pick in the draft. His first year, well, not so hot. Second year, was almost mind-bogglingly, bad. As you looked at Zach Wilson, his stats overall, completing like 54% of his passes in an era where the dink and dunk is very popular, and you're going to have a high completion percentage by comparison to maybe some of the quarterbacks of the distant past. 9 touchdown passes, 11 interceptions. He's been sacked 69 times in 23 starts. So exactly 3 times a game, he goes down. He makes a lot of blunders. I don't know. You're probably not familiar with the 60 Minutes pieces that were being done by the great Mike Wallace, and this is kind of a New York thing.
hmm
But I used to watch them, and they were my favorite pieces. Was Wallace going into or Warren Wallace going into a transmission shop somewhere in New York City that was putting in bogus transmissions in cars, and they had been caught red-handed. And Wallace would go in there with the camera and go, "I want to speak to Big Lou," and then Big Lou would come out and put a hand over the camera. And there would be like a little bit. You could see there was a tussle there, and they would finally, throw the 60 Minutes crew out on their ass. And you're thinking, well, maybe there was something to the idea that they were putting these bogus transmissions in, because they didn't even want to let these guys, come in to talk to them. You see this sometimes. I don't know if they have this, kind of thing in L.A., but we have a guy here that goes around to restaurants to get popped for like having, kitchen violations. Let's call them. Roaches crawling on the wall, whatever, fly in the soup, and he'll come in with the surprise camera and trying to talk to the owner, who then goes, you'll see him running in the parking lot out the back. That was kind of how these pieces went. But would you ever take your car to one of these places after watching that? No, because you're thinking these guys are criminals. They're crooks. I mean, you're an absolute fool if you believe that you're going to take your car there after Wallace has been there on 60 Minutes, and you're going to get a legitimate transmission. Like all of a sudden you're at Amco or something. So I don't know that I buy that about. I mean, how is it that Zach Wilson went from this horrifying entity that was deemed one of the biggest busts in draft history? I mean, this guy was one step away from being Jamarcus Russell, and I'm rooting for him. It would be a great Cinderella story, wouldn't it? And a radical turnaround for the people of New York. But how all of a sudden do they have this blind faith in this guy?
Well, he did spend a good offseason training with one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, Aaron Rodgers. And maybe, just maybe, Rodgers is good enough that even his presence can influence a
Wow.
series of radical change, as he suggests. I think it's
This is
that.
like a Scientology theory on sports, I believe.
Oh, don't pick.
I'm looking for Tom Cruise to weigh in on your side on this one.
Oh boy.
No, I hope
I
you're right, Henry. I am not one to want to just denounce players, but
yeah, I
I'm
think
glad you believe this. It gives me faith in the youth of America that you believe that this can happen.
it's it's it's
I'm
it's
struggling with
also
that.
it's also I have no relation to the New York Jets. Like this is not me speaking as a Jets fan. This is me
No,
speaking as an unbiased fan of the sport and fan of good cinema. And I believe that he is due for a redemption arc because it all the stars are aligning. In fact, this may have not been Aaron Rodgers' story. This could have been Zach Wilson's story all along.
I believe he is 3 picks away from the Jets signing Colt McCoy. Brady even came under consideration. Never mind Brett Favre. I hope it works out. I mean, I hope that you are 100% correct about this, and that the same fear factor. I mean, is this like diving off, a high board into a vat full of squid oil? The same fear factor, that you had about Zach Wilson just a few short months ago, probably has not been exactly dealt with to the point where it is completely gone. So we'll see. But that's all part of the aftermath. And then, of course, there's the I spit on your grave theory with Aaron Rodgers, which is the ugly part of the fallout
Yeah.
from the whole incident that took place. And that is the fans of the Dolphins here in South Florida, of the Buffalo Bills, of the New England Patriots. They are all reveling in the idea that the Jets fell flat on their face, even in spite of the fact that they won the first game. And that's I guess that was lost on me and a lot of people, that they actually won the ball game. In looking at this thing as being as catastrophic as it is, I personally, I mean, the loss I feel is that I wanted to see what Aaron Rodgers could do in this spot. With no, feeling either way. I mean, it's the worst thing. I don't know if this has happened to you, but it's time to throw in a towel on whatever relationship you're in when the indifference sets in, which I think in most marriages is what, like 3 years, where you just don't care anymore,
Right.
and that's never a good position to take. Yeah, it would be a wonderful conclusion to the story. The people that were dancing on the grave of the New York Jets, especially so here in Miami, because you're thinking, wow, I mean, who would be the natural heir to the idea that they were going to win the AFC East if Buffalo didn't? And Buffalo certainly looked like dog meat in their game against the Jets. I mean, their problems that we thought were maybe very superficial in the offseason and were going to just easily correct themselves in week number one as they trounced the New York Jets and once again proclaimed themselves as the favorites to win the division. Wow, they look worse than the Patriots in week one, did they not? How do you lose that game after being up 13-3 with Zach Wilson, perhaps pulling off a little Helen Keller there, the miracle worker, and, salvaging what otherwise was supposed to be a glamorous Jet season and turning into something that is right along those lines. That would be a great end to the story. But very interesting all the way around. Are you gearing up for another weekend of degenerate activity? Are
Are
you going
you
to be
kidding
betting
me?
that Liberty game by chance? Do you bet every game on the board? I think that's one of the real great degenerate characteristics of the youth of America. It's a reason I believe so much that America, once again, will be a great country again, despite the thinking of the far right.
I do look at the board, and I definitely go with the lion's share of the picks. I'm not a conservative bettor by any means. I throw money
Oh,
at
yeah? Wow.
whatever I want. Okay, let's take a look. Is there?
Liberty laying 3.5 on the road against Buffalo. Would you
Yeah.
degenerate to the point where that would become a
Yes.
game of concern for you?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. But this country was born on liberty and freedom. I will be betting on liberty once again.
Give me Liberty or give
Give me
me a
yeah.
deficit. That would be a new extrapolation on the line. All right, that's going to do it for the morning briefing. I don't know that we covered much ground here, but it sure was fun, Henry. It was good to be with you on this fine Wednesday edition of the program. We'll do it again tomorrow morning, and thank you so much for getting up all week long and doing this with me. And you will be live again later on No Filter, correct? Fantasy football.
I will be. I'm on podcast form now. I'll be live again on Friday. I'm
Okay.
just today and tomorrow. I'm prepping my betting show for Friday. So
All right. What is the hot play in fantasy football right now? I mean, what McCaffrey? If you have him, you're on your way to the
well,
championship.
you've been on your way if you have McCaffrey. You know, a lot of the things right now that's kind of kicking up sand is what do I do with all these Jets players? You know, everyone who drafted a Jets player like Garrett Wilson or Dalvin Cook or Brees Hall, they were all under the impression that Rodgers would be running that offense.
Yes.
My whole narrative all week is let's not panic. The reason these players are good to begin with and they're on the pedestal that they have for this year is because Zach Wilson was throwing to them last year, because Zach Wilson, as bad as he was leading that offense. I mean, Zach Wilson put Garrett Wilson on the map. Take that as far as you want. Obviously, Garrett Wilson's incredibly talented, but who was throwing to Garrett Wilson last year? Zach Wilson. Brees Hall was killing it in an offense run by Zach Wilson. Dalvin Cook was playing with Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is just older Zach Wilson, right? So I'm saying don't mortgage the farm just yet, and don't
All right.
completely don't abandon everything on the Jets. Do not abandon the ship. Just whatever you're gonna do last week, do the same thing this week, regardless if Rodgers is there or not. If you were gonna play Garrett Wilson, Brees Hall, Dalvin Cook, play them again. Just give it another week before we completely sound the alarms.
I would
That's the
play Garrett
narrative.
Wilson. I think he's the lone salvation that could bail out. I mean, naturally Zach Wilson has to bring whatever level of his play up quite a bit
Right,
to be
right,
anything close to what you were
right.
anticipating out of Aaron Rodgers. Maybe he's capable of doing it. I'm trying to check real quickly here, see who the Jets go against this week. They play the Cowboys. Oh my God! After that bludgeoning, I mean, the Cowboys are determined to just wipe
Mm,
out the entire state of New York. So,
exactly.
yeah,
But that's
New
what
York
all of
City.
America. That's what all of America thinks, right? Is that the
Yeah.
Cowboys are America's team is going to finally win a Super Bowl this year. They shut down the Giants. The Giants shut down themselves. The Giants are the biggest dipshits in New York, bigger than the Jets.
Bigger than Giuliani.
Oh, yeah, easily. The
All right.
Giants put their faith in a man called Daniel Jones, who they coin him as Danny Dimes. It's Danny in debt, is what he really is. He's not
Well,
good.
and yeah, Danny Dull also. I mean, is he the most boring, star quarterback that you've
Good
ever
God.
seen?
But he is
Seems
good
like a
looking, though.
decent enough guy, but
He is handsome. He's got a good chin, but Danny Doe is perfect.
yeah, he has a bigger chin than George Chavallo, the old boxer that used to be around in the Ali era. That was always taking, probably took almost as many beatings as Jerry Quarry did when they had ESPN Classics, and night after night you were watching Quarry get the shit beat out of him. It was they finally had to take the network down completely because nobody could take it anymore. I think the Quarry estate sued ESPN Classics at one point, said this is cruel and unusual. You know, it's great. And we'll sign off with this, Henry. I mean, listening to you talking about Zach Wilson is almost like listening to Joel Osteen talk about the Lord himself. And I am going to go ahead and send, I hope you will superimpose on the screen there a little graphic with your post office box, and I'm going to mail you a check to help support the congregation. And we'll come back and do it again tomorrow. All right. Have fun on your podcast. And thanks so much for your help so far throughout the last week and change. And we'll do it again tomorrow for Henry Markin. I'm Jeff DeForest, and that's this morning's edition of your morning briefing.